We're going to get started in just a minute. We're so glad that you joined us today for the Tribal Action Plan Learning Series, the first module. Ken, in the chat box, could you put your name and let us know where you're calling in from? Thanks, Sheila. We're going to give it just another half a minute, then we're going to introduce ourselves, and we have a special guest from our team who will give us an opening prayer to get us started on In a Good Way. Hey, Kimberly. Dottie, nice to see you.
Santo Domingo, nice.
Nice. Oh, there's Jacques. Hi. Jason. Simon, nice. Maria. So shall we get started with an introduction, Cipriano?
Sure.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us today. You have entered into a room on Tribal Action Plan Learning Series. Thank you. This is our first module. We have 4 modules to follow up after this. Just a little shout out. You're going to see a graphic here in just a moment. The tree graphic was commissioned by a Comanche artist at the Intertribal Visions in Lawton, Oklahoma. Just wanted to give them a shout out. I'm real proud of that graphic. Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Pearson and I am a member of the SAMHSA TTA Center. I've been working with Cipriano Lucario since 2014 on tribal action planning and more. I'm calling in from the Shenandoah Valley in Central Virginia, just below Charlottesville, Virginia. And I'm from the DC metro area. The theme of my career has been bridging policy, practice, and research, and that got me very far into my career. I have a master's degree in education psychology from UVA, and I've been a principal investigator for field research that led to a national report that was released on Capitol Hill. You might have seen it, Strengthening Indian Country Through Tribal Youth Programs. I served a little bit of time, about 3 years as a fellow at Department of Justice under the Obama administration, learning about the Tribal Law and Order Act, helping to start up the CTAS, Coordinated Tribal Assistance Solicitation work, and also standing up the Office of Indian Alcohol and Substance Abuse. I've been to so many tribes from Martha's Vineyard all the way up to Kodiak Island, the Great Lakes, the Great Plains, all over the Pueblos, the Rancherias, so many tribes. I feel like I know many people and I've learned a lot. And the most wonderful person I met was Cipriano Lucario, who's right here. He's going to introduce himself, and we work really well together on the Tribal Action Plan. Cipriano?
Thank you, Sarah. I'm always impressed hearing your bio and your commitment to the work. Good afternoon, everybody, and just thank you for your time, taking time out of your guys' workday and your guys' efforts to join us in this conversation. My name is Cipriano Lucario. I'm a proud member of the Navajo Nation and been supporting work in and out of DC for, the last decade, pretty much. Very appreciative of the opportunity to serve Indian country. I'm learning a lot in Washington, DC, and here to share as much resources and information and observations our TA Center has had around strategic planning and the opportunity of tribal action plans. Thank you.
Thank you, Cipriano. And now I want to turn it over to Valerie Pina. Valerie, I'm not getting your name right. Please say it for me. She's from Alaska and she's fantastic, and she's going to give us a nice opening today.
Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Valerie Pingaik. I'm Chipik from the Kashunme tribe here in Chivek, Alaska, where it's still morning. So good morning to all of you where it's still morning, and good afternoon to everyone else who's a few hours ahead in my future. That's how I like to phrase it. As we get started here, I'd like for you to bring to mind the things that you need prayer for or that you're thankful for. And I'll give you a few moments to do that. So I will now lift up those prayers and the blessings with a Chupik prayer song that we often sing. It's called Ayeyanga. Ayeyanga, 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 Yaha, Ya. Kuyanagayan. Thank you, Sarah. I'll turn it back over to you.
Valerie, you're the best. Thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen now. Cipriano, let me know when you can see it.
Perfect.
Awesome. So again, this graphic was created by an artist, a Comanche artist in Lawton, Oklahoma. I commissioned him to do this work. I described the Tribal Action Plan Learning Series, and it took him like half a day, and he returned this image, and I'm so proud of it. It gets to the whole concept of doing this work seasonally, which is the way it should be done. So before we get started, we want to thank Maureen Madison and Jan Dunbar Cooper at SAMHSA for giving us this opportunity to work with tribes and to speak with you today. For 7 years, Cipriano and I have teamed up to work with and listen to tribes addressing the impact of alcohol and drugs. They're seeking culturally relevant ways to make positive change. And we're talking about tribal leaders and tribal community advocates who have had enough of the loss from suicide, drugs, and alcohol. And many have navigated cycles of helpful federal grants that nibble at the edges, but are not able to get to the heart of or fill the hole left by the specter of historical traumas. This is a task only tribes can do for themselves. And those who champion Native tribes and villages can stand with them to guide and cheer them on. This Tribal Action Plan Learning Series is one such attempt, and we encourage you to listen with an open heart and an open mind, and ask questions and share your wisdom, and imagine the possibilities as we move through the series. The way to a TAP is not through just a workshop and a template. We've learned that for sure. It's a journey to be traveled through the seasons of time and experienced with as many tribal members as possible. This series is an overview of the TAP journey meant to spark your interest, give encouragement, clarity, and challenge you to dream of the good life for the people and to take the first steps to actionable change. Are you ready? Cipriano?
Perfect. Yes, thank you for really kind of laying the groundwork. And as you could see here, this is going to be a 4-part module series. And so we're taking a little time in between the modules, but you could see right here at the bottom of your screen is how we're breaking down this Tribal Action Plan series. Our hope is to inspire members of your team who are on the call, provide proactive thinking on the opportunities about the history of the law, the purpose and the role and the benefits of a tribal action plan, and looking at the opportunities of gathering local data to drive your system. We know that there's a lot of support and untapped resources and answers within our local community that can provide healing, expand workforce, and contribute to the wellness efforts on the local level. And the TAP, what we're learning as a TA center, is a way to synthesize these efforts, find the frequency to begin to open up discussions. And we're going to be sharing our best practices and observations throughout this TAP webinar series. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks. So this first module is just about exploring and helping you to think about where you want to gather knowledge and resources before you begin. The next module, Plan and Prepare, will happen on June 23rd, the same time. Module 3 will happen the next month on July 28th. That's acting and adjusting. That's sort of getting into that implementation part. And then module 4 will be on September 1st, rounding out the series, and we'll talk about assessing, reflecting, and revising. and thinking about starting the process all over again, because this is talking about a living document, a tribal action plan. So we're working through this seasonally, even though we're kind of at the end of spring. We're going to move in starting in the fall season. But before we get started, I just wanted to share the process with you. When you get involved with the Tribal Action Plan, the first thing you're going to look at is data. And these days we're emphasizing looking at local data rather than waiting for disaggregated data coming down from a national or state source. We're really emphasizing local data. Then part of that local data is also looking at the environment and doing a scan on what your strengths, challenges, opportunities, and threats may be. What partnerships already are existing, what partnerships are not happening, doing more of an environmental scan. So you're getting those bits of information under your belt. Then we think about community mobilization. So we're doing all of this work before we even begin to talk about TAP development. We're getting the momentum, creating the buzz, getting that movement going. Then the TAP development is a process within itself. And that's, if anyone knows about strategic action planning, tribal action plan is very, very similar. And then we talk about TAP implementation and then looking at monitoring and improving that TAP. And that brings us back to the cycle, full cycle again, and you move forward. You should be revising a TAP at least every 2 years to keep it fresh. And just a few words about what is a tribal action plan. We don't want to assume that everybody on the call knows what it is. So a few points are, and Cipriano, feel free to jump in at any time. It's a process that is led by a tribe that leads to a living document, a strategic plan to guide specific change determined by your members to address alcohol and substance misuse. It should reflect your tribal cultural concepts of healing and wellness. And it supports tribal self-determination and nation building. It fosters strengths. It's driven by current local needs, challenges, assets, and resources. It talks about taking direct action, implementation, and evaluation all along the way. And the TAP development or revision initiates a healing process that's so important, that is supported but not directed by federal agencies led by the U.S. Departments of Health and Human Services, Justice, and Interior. So to give you an overview, the first module is about exploring and gathering knowledge and resources before we begin. And the kinds of things that we'll explore are these. Cipriano, did you want to take this and just explore the leadership track and community track?
Sure, thank you. Yes, as you could see here, we really hope to have a discussion and we really want to share our observations and best practices. And in our collective work as a TA Center, learning from tribes around the strategic planning process, and many of you probably know this on the call as well, is that in order to get things moving within our tribal nations, our tribal communities, our tribal organizations, there's a collaboration between our tribal council, our tribal leadership, our directors, and our traditional knowledge keepers, our community champions, and our community efforts. And what we have learned is that in order to be truly effective with a strategic plan, no one track can lead it all. And so in this discussion and throughout this series, we hope to provide some observation and best practices that we have seen in regards to these two tracks moving through that cycle around the tree of community mobilization, developing a vision. What are the resources that are needed to get each of these tracks connected and moving forward? And what are the strengths to unify these two tracks? And what are the challenges that these two tracks working in collaboration can overcome? So as you could see here in the bold points, these are just some things that we have seen really resonate the importance of why these community champions, these traditional knowledge keepers can be vital to the strategic planning process. And what does good, healthy tribal leadership support in order to grease the wheels for that community track effort to move as smoothly as possible? So, throughout this conversation, you're going to hear us talk about the community opportunities, and you're also going to hear us talk about leadership opportunities. And this is to really kind of section off these two areas and talk about the importance of collaboration within our tribal nations, unifying leadership and the community voice for strategic action plan or a tribal action plan. Thank you.
Wonderful. So we'll go over these two tracks today on exploring and gathering knowledge and resources, but to give you a preview of what's to come, I'm going to go through the other sessions. Planning and preparing has a number of items that we'll highlight. I'm not going to read these to you, but this just kind of gives you a little bit more of the nitty gritty of the planning pieces. We'll talk about the SCOT analysis, asset mapping, community readiness assessment, the GONA, things that we really believe need to happen during the plan before you finish the plan. The community gets involved to do a number of things to prioritize the goals and desired outcomes. We shouldn't be working on this event alone.
Mm-hmm.
And then our third meeting, we'll talk about acting and adjusting. Some of the topics include thinking about who will be responsible for each goal, who will evaluate, who will secure the resources. Do you need training or joint events? What about a crisis response team, maintaining the TAP, launching the goals and objectives? What is your plan to get that into movement? The community track will be looking at how to mobilize the community by adopting a collaborative mindset, setting up partnerships, and developing a crisis intervention protocol if you need one, and promoting TAP awareness and involvement. There's a lot going on here. We'll cover that in 2 months. And then we'll round it out with reflecting, assessing, and revising for module 4. And some of those topics we'll cover are the ones that you see in here. I like the part of making sure that we circle back around to weave in any cultural teachings and language in case we didn't get that the first time. And we're really important in bold on the left-hand side, use TAP to pursue future grants. Very important. And very important also is to remember to evaluate the early signs of the TAP's impact and to celebrate early and often. So what to expect? As we move forward with this series, we want you to know that we've been working with tribes for over 7 years now, and we've listened and learned a lot. We understand that each tribe comes to this journey with different needs, skills, and a level of commitment. Just like that labyrinth, we all have to go through the journey ourselves and as a team. We can guide you, but we cannot write your TAP for you. We've been requested a few times to write a TAP, but that just doesn't work for many reasons. And on this journey, there is no direct path. The answers aren't always in front of you, and there are no right answers. We really advise that you choose a diverse team to go with you, and as many people as possible, old and young, people in recovery, people who are in law enforcement in various sectors of the community. You're gonna need them, you're gonna need their voice and their help. Don't be too proud to ask for help. And draw upon the wisdom of your ancestors. What would they have done? Think back on how they would have handled some things that are being addressed today. Basically, our biggest understanding is that the way cannot be known, it must be traveled. It's just an experience you have to go through. No easy way through this. Cipriano, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
Sure, thank you. You know, in this process, and I'm glad that Sarah kind of just reflects on our TA Center's opportunity to serve Indian country. And we've been, you know, banging at this drum for a while in regards to it. And some of the things that really float to the top, especially for anybody coming from a tribe where the tribal action plan might be in the beginning phases for your tribal nations or tribal programs consideration. What to expect? Healing is primary. We cannot begin to unpack proactive prevention when their community or our relatives are in crisis. So really thinking about healing as primary. And so many times we have been pulled into tribal action plan or strategic planning, and we take a step back for a minute and really engage in the community or the tribal nations in regards to healing. And what does that look like? And the second piece is understanding what the norms are. You know, how do we move forward? What's needed in our efforts to support strategic planning? And this, you know, for anybody who's familiar with the Gathering of Native Americans or the GONA curriculum, the norms is such a valuable tool in this. What is the fabrics needed to have these safe conversations? What are the tools and the protocols that will help us not get stuck on the trauma? How do we have solution-focused conversations? And how do we engage so everybody could be part of the solution and everybody has a seat at the table? These are no small feats in our tribal communities or tribal nations or with our relatives, especially when some of our tribes might be still dealing with things that have impacted them, labeled as the Hatfield and McCoys, things that have happened maybe 2 or 3 generations ago, or that the impact of historical trauma and the challenges of those intergenerational unhealthy patterns that evolved from those impacts of our tribal relatives. So the norms, so even just thinking about this call, the norms for us to have a conversation, we hope that you ask us questions, and we expect to have some homework at the end of this webinar, thinking about resources or challenges or ideas that you present. So please feel free to raise your hand if you have a question. Mark Taylor is viewing the features on this web platform, and we could unmute your line and you could personally ask the question. For anybody who might have a little mic fright, please feel free to type the question in the chat box, and we will do our due diligence to track the conversations and track the questions. Sometimes on webinars, people ask questions and their resource or the idea or the concept's right around the corner. So you might hear Sarah and I just say, oh, that's a great question. The perspective is coming up. So we're not just pushing your question away. We're actually tracking the question to make sure that we kind of identify where those resources are coming up right around the corner in the particular Prezi. So we hope that you ask questions. Please feel free to raise your hand or do something that we can track and understand who's out there and who has a question. But our expectation is that we hold a conversation and we present resources that are helpful for you in this effort. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. Yes, share your wisdom. So where do we begin? We have a few questions that we ask rhetorically when we meet with tribes for the first time. We ask them, what do you know about the TAP already? And sometimes they may come to us with a tribal action plan that's sort of a mimeograph or something that was scanned in from the mid-'80s. And it was written by an attorney. And we're excited to look at that. And then we kind of share with them that we're going to do it a little differently this time. Cipriano, did you have anything else to add on this one?
I would definitely say, I think one of the lessons learned that we have as a tribal TTA center supporting SAMHSA's initiatives is if we are not careful, we can end up in an echo chamber with behavioral health professions. And as we learn about the tribal action plan and the opportunity and the role that the TAP serves, how do we expand that behavioral health circle to be inclusive to the tribal social services, the tribal public safety efforts, the other important programs that are assisting and supporting our tribal citizens. The formal ones like the clinical, the medical, the public safety, the courts, or even maybe the informal ones, our traditional knowledge keepers, our ceremonies, our protocols, our faith-based communities. And so these questions that you're about to see is a way that our team tries to gauge the frequency of the knowledge and the understanding and the perceptions of a tribal action plan. And so as you could see here, these are the questions that we would talk out loud and hopefully have program community members, tribal leaders, try to answer these questions as honest as possible, because this gives us a pulse of where to begin, which is no small feat as a national TA center. Thank you, Sarah.
Sure. So we always ask, how do you know your tribe is ready to develop the TAP? And by this question, we're really pushing the envelope on getting the initial team to start thinking that it's not just them. How are your department heads? Do they even know you're looking for a tribal action plan? How about outside department heads into the community? How do you know your tribe is ready to develop the TAP? And oftentimes people don't know for sure. So we walk them through it. We ask them who's at the planning table, but more importantly, who's not and maybe should be. We ask them who and what do we need in the room to assure a healthy and safe conversation. Sometimes we don't know what we're walking into. There could be some politics going on that we didn't know about. So we have to tread very carefully and kind of ask some leading questions to kind of see the lay of the land. Cipriano?
And as you could see, some of the questions are really geared to understanding the tribal nation or the tribal organization's knowledge of the law, maybe the background or the purpose of the law. Some of the questions are geared to understanding the current efforts around the collaborative mindset, who's at the table, who's not at the table. And this slide is really starting to look at the evaluation piece, the tracking piece. And this is a great question that I love asking tribes because I think this really starts to peel back the layer of the opportunity of community-based participatory research. How do our tribal programs, our tribal efforts, our tribal services know that they are successful? How are we measuring success? And who measures that success? What we have learned is some tribes really depend on outside support to identify these outcome measures. What we have found over the years is the more the tribe owns the outcome measure goal, the opportunity of measuring becomes a lot easier, and it really starts to organize the local workforce versus maybe that outside support or those consultants or even outside evaluators. So these open-ended questions are designed not just to ask the question and listen, but actually give us an opportunity to harvest information and really start to begin strategizing from the very beginning. Where do we begin with understanding the different components of a tribal action plan? Thank you, Sarah.
Absolutely. And as Cipriano alluded to earlier, we want to make sure that the group knows the TAP journey is about a nation of people healing themselves. So this is not going to be a quick overnight success. It's going to be something that's a process, like we mentioned earlier, because people who are in pain, they don't heal overnight. So the Tribal Action Plan is not just an action plan for a program, it's an action plan for the entire tribe and where they're going, and part of that is healing. Did you have anything you wanted to add, Cipriano?
No, I think you covered it. And I again, this is great open-ended questions and really, really helpful for us coming from the outside to begin to build that relationship, learn from the tribe, and start to identify the frequency of the beginning conversation. Thank you.
Absolutely. So we're gonna get ready to get into the nitty-gritty here in just a moment, but I really love this image right here, and it leads to a story that Cipriano talks about the three sisters. When we think about prevention, that's what Tribal Action Plan is all about. It embodies the spirit of prevention and helps a tribe tell us their story of tribal sovereignty. We're looking at a nice canyon here with a river that leads into the rocky falls, the Rockies, and then water's falling, and then you have a nice churning at the bottom. If you can imagine this relating to the world of alcohol and drugs, this is what we're thinking about when we look at this picture. Cipriano?
Yes, Sarah and I are big fans of trying to keep it simple and really think about engaging our community on a community level. Our hope is that if our grandmothers don't understand what we're doing, how do they know what we're doing for the children? And my tribe and my family, our grandparents have done so much to help the next generation. And so Sarah and I always talk about how do we keep this strategic planning process simple. Many of our tribes have the story of the three sisters. And if anybody's unfamiliar with the three sisters, in short and in brief, three sisters come up to a river and they see babies floating down the river. And each sister takes a different approach. One sister jumps in and is in very deep water and doing her very best to save one baby. Another sister stands on the shoreline and uses a long stick or a long tree branch and tries to corral and help her sister as well as corral the baby floating down. And one sister takes off running upriver and she wants to see what's or who's throwing the babies in the water. And this story really relates to, at least Sarah and I, we have, a million different interpretations that we've learned from tribes that talk about it. But the story really talks about, working efficiently, effectively, being proactive prevention, crisis management, collaboration is all woven into this real short story. And so in this slide, you could see here, as we have learned to think about and use this story as a way to engage the spectrum of prevention, intervention, and postvention, you could see here how we with thoughtfulness. Now you could see some flowers are already over the rapids. They're in the danger zone. They're in the deep waters. Some flowers are right before the cliffs. That crisis management might be that crisis intervention. And as you could see, the flower way up above the river in the calm, cool waters before it gets rapid, that's the proactive prevention efforts. And so as we talk about this story and use this cultural story in engaging tribes to think about which sister are our strategic plan goals and objectives targeting, which sister are they really looking at trying to understand and best support. Are we going to be working with the sister that is treading water in the deep end, just trying to save one baby at a time? How about the sister that's using the tree branch and trying to corral her relative, support that baby and use tools to bring them to safety? And what's the resources needed for that sister to make that journey upstream and to be proactive and to think about what's stopping those babies from getting in the water in the first place? And so this is ways that we engage the tribe using cultural stories, using traditional perspectives, and really try to keep the strategic planning process simple so we could work with the community to identify community-based strategies in prevention to enhance the tribal social services. Sarah, did you want to kind of dive in on our most recent interpretation and lessons learned from a community?
Sure. And before I do that, I'll just say that, I look at these flowers as examples of sometimes federal grants that come in, those emergency grants from FEMA, might be right before you're going over the edge, some treatment over here, CTAS and Garrett Lee Smith. I mean, the waters are rocky when you see the flowers going through here. As Cipriano was saying, when you do a tribal action plan, you go way upstream to think ahead so that you get the answers and save the babies before they fall over the edge. And we were just speaking to a group in Yankton Sioux a few weeks ago, and we got a wonderful quote from an elder that I want to share here. She said, I believe her name was Vani, and she said, sometimes departments and services operate like they're on an island. Of course, that gave me a visual cue. I'm like, yeah, they're right in the middle of the water and they're in a little island and they're broadcasting out, but they're not coordinating their broadcasting. So you've got various departments of public safety and schools and health clinics and economic development and business council. They're all broadcasting to the same people, the same tribal people that are trying to swim to their shores, but they're not operating together. And so their broadcast message only reaches so far, and yet they're trying to reach the same people. So there must be a better way to do that. I like that image. I like what Vani was saying.
I also think too, just kind of thinking back to that image too, that's also our federal grants, due to the siloed nature of funding. How do we create linkages between maybe the Department of Justice prevention funding, the SAMHSA prevention funding, the IHS prevention funding, and how can a tribe work smarter, not harder, and really thinking about those, how to break down those silos and actually start to unify some of their prevention efforts to maximize or synthesize those funding streams across too. So I really like that. I think she really stirred the pot for us, Sarah, and kind of giving us that quote and gave us a whole line of thinking in regards to how do we start to unify some of these projects under a tribal action plan.
We like those visuals. So this visual right here, again, created by that wonderful team, that Comanche team in Lawton, Oklahoma, Intertribal Visions, described to them what we wanted to do with the TAP. And you can see the other daisies that surround the big sunflower and other sunflowers. This is representing strategic action plans that may be part of a coordinated tribal assistance solicitation grant or a Native Connections grant or a tour grant, or any number of grants from any number of federal departments that you are responsible for when you accept those federal dollars. But with a tribal action plan, it's sort of pulling them all together. And a tribal action plan really helps a tribe keep on top of everything because it's led by a tribal coordinating committee that's informed by the community. That's powerful. That's extremely powerful. And I think tribes have been doing that for centuries, but things got disrupted.
And I also would say too, you know, that concept and idea of that sunflower is not new. You know, whether we call it wraparound services or we call it a system of care or an integrated system, you know, that concept and idea is nothing new. And I think, you know, when we really look at it, it probably maybe mirrors some of our traditional teachings or our cultural models in serving and supporting our tribal citizens.
Thank you. I want to pause for just a moment, Cipriano, and see if we have any questions or comments before we proceed.
Perfect. I've been able to track one, Mark. I know that you've been observing, but I saw the comment by, I believe it was Gilberta Belgardi, and she was just asking for a link to the PowerPoint. And I shared with Gilberta that the Prezi, Sarah, I know that you put the link already in the chat box, but I'll make sure that we repost that link a couple times so participants have the web address to have access to this Prezi. And thank you for the comment.
And we will be adding to this, just as we request you always add to your TAP, we're always adding to this training. So if you haven't seen it in a few months, visit it again and you may see some more stuff. Mm-hmm. So now we're going to get into a little bit more about the key elements, origins, and benefits of the TLOA TAP, and talk about understanding the connection between the strategic action plans that you may already have and the tribal action plan, and a little bit more. And a little bit, we'll talk about the tribal coordinating committee, what that entails, and a few other extras. So I'll go ahead and get started. I don't know if you guys remember the Obama administration, but it wasn't that long ago. But the Tribal Law and Order Act of 2010, it came out in late July of 2010. It amends the Indian Alcohol Substance Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act of the mid-'80s, which mandates that the federal leadership from the US Departments of Health and Human Services, Interior, and Justice work together and enter into a memorandum of agreement to do this, and this is so important, to create and implement a coordinated effort for the prevention and treatment of alcohol and substance abuse at the local level. That means at the tribal level. The authorities for that MOA include the Snyder Act, the Indian Determination and Education Act, you may have heard of that, and the ISAPT, the Indian Alcohol Substance Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act, amended by TLOA. In case anyone here is a policy wonk, I'm a recovering policy wonk.
Sarah, on that note, Coleman just asked, is there a acronym list, definition list? And I didn't even think about that. That's actually a great question. Unfortunately, Coleman, we don't have a list put together yet, but if there's any acronyms that are a challenge right away, put them in the chat box. And Sarah, I think we might have a little homework just thinking about acronyms and how we could break them down a little bit. Absolutely. I did try to spell them out, like this one, the Indian Alcohol and Substance Abuse, IASA Partners. Here are their logos of a DOJ, Interior, and Health and Human Services. So they lead the pack, but they are not the only members of the ISAP team.
The Tribal Law and Order Act amendments require the Indian Alcohol and Substance Abuse federal partners that we just mentioned and other federal agencies to do some important things. It asks them to determine the scope of the alcohol and substance abuse problem faced by tribes. Now that's no small job, if you can imagine, with over, is it now 600 federally recognized tribes or close to it? You've got to really be on your toes. So that could be a big monumental job right there, but they're responsible for that. Also, they are responsible for identifying the resources and programs of each agency that would be relevant to a coordinated effort on behalf of tribes. And they are required to coordinate existing agency programs with those established under Tribal Law and Order Act.
And I really want to say to everybody on the call, that is the meat and potatoes of the law. The law is really charged to the federal system on those three tasks and these partners that you're going to see here. And so, you know, when we really think about what the Tribal Law and Order Act does, it really is pushing for the federal collaborative agencies to do work internally to benefit Indian country.
So who specifically are we talking about? Because those departments are pretty big. So who specifically is responsible for this work within the departments? For Department of Health and Human Services, that's the first bullet, DHHS. That would be the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration, SAMHSA, or SAMHSA, and the Indian Health Service. So they are the target audience for that. For Department of Interior, we have the Bureau of Indian Affairs and the Bureau of Indian Education. And from Department of Justice, Office of Justice Programs are responsible for the Tribal Law and Order Act. They are all responsible to get together to coordinate the resources and programs to assist tribes in achieving their goals in prevention, intervention, and the treatment of alcohol and substance abuse. And here are the logos of under the umbrella of the Indian Alcohol and Substance Abuse Interdepartmental Coordinating Committee. That's the group that I served on when I was a tribal fellow at DOJ. We've got HHS, DOJ, Interior, and underneath here we have Bureau of Indian Education, Bureau of Indian Affairs, Office of Justice Programs, NIH, CMS, all the alphabet soup. HRSA, I know people maybe hear from HRSA today, and others. Administration,
Yes.
Children and Families, and more.
Yes, yes.
And it goes beyond that even. It includes the Corporation for National and Community Service, Department of Labor, Housing, HUD, and others. But these are the key players. Now, this quote, I think this is a fantastic quote, and I think it's really important. And Cipriano, would you mind reading this for us? It's really important for people to hear what the OISIS leadership testified in front of the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs at the end of 2015. It really explains what the federal group is doing on behalf of tribes, or where they're going.
Yes, yes. A primary focus of the IASA committee is to advance comprehensive tribal action planning so that tribes can identify resources, priorities, and design a systems approach to treating alcohol and substance abuse disorders and their co-occurring conditions. The intent of the coordinated federal TAP assistance is to provide guidance, direction, coordination, and improve access for tribes to appropriate federal resources that may assist them in developing and implementing tribal action plans. The federal TAP work group coordinates support for tribes that choose to develop a tribal action plan to prevent and treat alcohol and substance abuse disorders. The work group has established a protocol for tribal requests for assistance that works with its partner agency regional staff to coordinate assistance and resource to tribes. So this is what the IASA partners, the federal agencies, are informing the government of what they're trying to do under the Tribal Law and Order Act. And I think that this is vital for tribes to see, because this is what they're stating that they are doing.
it's a good point of clarity. So we know that they know that we know.
And we have a question, and I love always reading this name. Hello, Jackie. It's good to see your name, and thank you very much for attending the webinar. And we hope that these resources are helpful for your important work. The question, Sarah, is, does this include the vendors and contractors under IASA?
The vendors and contractors of IASA, if they are grantees, yes, they're working on behalf of those departments, those agencies, yes.
I think that's a really good question too, because if the federal agency outsources efforts to support their implementation of the Tribal Law and Order Act, are they also outsourcing their sovereign efforts to tribes?
No.
That is a great question, Jackie. No. You got my wheels turning on that, and I think no. that's a So
always
just
falls back to the federal department and the federal agency. Always.
Exactly. Great question. I think that will stimulate a lot of conversation as well.
Great. So just touching on, so what is the role? We know a little bit about what the federal role is. They're reaching their hand out to see if you need help. So what's the role for tribes? If you're a singular tribal government, you may, at your discretion, adopt a tribal resolution that supports or authorizes a tribal coordinating committee in your tribe to develop a tribal action plan. If you're a consortium, which we have seen, I think in GLTSI, Great Lakes Intertribal Council, it could be that you have a number of tribes that are wanting to work on one centralized regional TAP, and as long as you include authorizing tribal resolutions from each individual tribe, you can do a tribal consortium TAP.
Mm-hmm.
They just want to make sure that if you kick up a TAP to the Office of Indian Alcohol and Substance Abuse, they want it to come within a tribal resolution attached so that they know the tribal council approved it. Again, what's the federal role? The federal partners are required to cooperate with you in the development of your TAP should you request help. They're required to coordinate resources and programs, federal ones relevant to alcohol and substance abuse prevention, intervention, and treatment. And if you request it, they are required to enter into an agreement with you for the implementation of your tribal action plan. So part of that help is what you're getting today. SAMHSA TTA Center is providing this service to help you understand what a tribal action plan is. So this is they're fulfilling partially part of that requirement.
Yes, because SAMHSA is the identified federal agency to coordinate the Tribal Law and Order Act Collaborative Partners efforts. So for any tribe or tribal organization, as you could see, all of those alphabet soups right there are under the guidance and leadership of SAMHSA in implementing these efforts.
So, and this works through the Indian Alcohol Substance Abuse interdepartmental group that's overseen by the Office of Indian Alcohol Substance Abuse. Very confusing sometimes. But the memorandum of agreement that we talked about earlier was published in the Federal Register. If you need something to help you get to sleep at night, download it. It's got a lot of details, pretty good stuff. But generally the focal point of the MOA include 10 areas. They're looking at the scope of the problem in Indian country. What are some example minimum program standards? They are trying to identify programs and resources, and they've fulfilled a lot of this already. They talk about TAP development, which is what we're talking about now. They had a newsletter. I don't know if they're going to reinstate the newsletter. I was writing some articles for that newsletter, but it did exist and it may be continuing, I hope. They talk about law enforcement and judicial trainings, child protection, child welfare, juvenile detention centers are a topic. In 2013, DOJ's Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention worked with BIA to develop a model juvenile code, which is out there online. And of course, last but not least are BIE and IHS's, that's Indian Health Service. They have youth regional treatment centers in regional centers across the country. I think they have about 11 or 12 of those, Cipriano, I'm not sure. But that contributes to this addressing alcohol and substance misuse problems for youth in Indian countries. Not nearly enough, but it's a start. And then they, of course, they have a website, SAMHSA website. You might have seen it. So I want to pause for a second. Are there any other questions, Cipriano?
No other questions. And I just, for everybody on the call, I just sent the link in the chat box. So the link is the most current chat. So if you just copy that for future use, that will give you access to the Prezi that is being used for this learning series.
Thank you. So just some of the benefits include just the general sharing of information. Once you develop a TAP and then you share it or kick it up to Washington, D.C., up to SAMHSA, they give it to the Office of Indian Alcohol and Substance Abuse, that's OISA. And this gives that team the information they need to help you. Without that, they're just shooting in the dark. They don't know really what you need, but that tribal action plan will tell them exactly what you want and what you need. Your TAP and the tribal resolution are formal documents that inform ISA federal partners. And the TAP obviously is your roadmap for tribal leadership and members. So it's really, that bullet should be number one. That's the really most important piece. Whether you get support or not from the federal agencies, you shouldn't wait. You should just move forward with your TAP to improve things in your tribe the way you want them. And we're going to talk more about that in just a moment. So I'm going to turn this over to Cipriano to talk a little bit about the importance of and inclusion of Tribal Coordinating Committee to get things kicked off in a good way.
Yes, yes. So in SAMHSA's efforts in getting this information out to tribes, there's a couple supporting documents that have been around for quite some time. And in these documents, the Tribal Action Plan guidelines and the frequently asked questions, they refer to a guidance committee to help implement the TAP within the tribal nation or the local community. Many of our tribes have committees already around an array of different topics. So this would be what they call a tribal coordinating committee, but the tribes will have the flexibility of identifying what the name, the support, and who would be on them. This committee that oversees the tribal action plan implementation can be a collection of community champions, leadership, as you could see here within the heart, different areas of expertise, local knowledge, experiences, professional categories, and leadership. And how do we have these conversations? Again, we have seen many tribes implement an advisory committee or a tribal coordinating committee, whatever they decide to name it. They have quarterly meetings, monthly meetings, and this committee helps just track the efforts that have been identified within the TAP. Are they successful? Is it working? Is it not working? And how can we revise it or shape it? So the Tribal Coordinating Committee includes members from all these different arenas. Now, there are some best practices around this that we have seen or observed. And as you could see here in the green print, you know, sometimes we always focus on those community champions, those A students in our youth councils that we know are grounded and moving forward. But what we have learned and what we have seen is sometimes our recently balanced members, our members that are in early recovery, our challenging members, maybe even our vulnerable community members, tend to be the community members that are most invested in creating change. They have the most experience navigating the system. They have an understanding of the gaps in the services, and they could be great vocal pieces in maintaining momentum, because that's one of the biggest challenges that we have seen in tribal action plan development over time is maintaining momentum. And so having individuals that are in the community, that are grounded in the community, that aren't going to leave the community, we have seen have been extremely helpful for maintaining momentum. And, you know, as thinking about I know I'm not as green behind the ear as I used to be. And so, you know, thinking about our young people, you know, sometimes it's very hard to understand how you can support. Where do you fit in? So we have seen that tribes that implement a tribal coordinated committee that help guide and implement the tribal action plan, when there are community members or members that have recently navigated the system and they're finding their balance, they can be very valuable partners in the tribal coordinating committee. But this team has a great opportunity of synthesizing the prevention and wellness efforts without micromanaging, but really providing some guidance, some feedback, and maybe some proactive thinking. Thank you, Sarah.
Sure, and they are the heartbeat of the whole TAP process. Here are some suggested tips for the TCC. Cipriano, I wanted to pass this one back to you.
Yes, you know, so the yellow print on the side is kind of the notes, and maybe, you know, some of this stuff might be redundant for a lot of you on the call because, you know, we want to always come with an open mind. We always want to have that collaborative mindset. You know, we want to have those regular meetings. Yet, man, that's a big challenge in itself. And coming with an open mind when we might be understaffed or overworked, you know, are in crisis. This is where, you know, to be honest with you, with these COVID challenges and the expansion of telecommunication or the use of Zoom, we're finding that this new tool of virtual connection can be a vital tool to creating some flexibility for people to participate in these meetings. So, you know, this is about building the collaborative mindset. One thing that's not on here that can be a foundational piece of this is how do we do this in a cultural way, a way that would mean something to our community members than just coming in for a lunch meeting. A lot of times we see TCCs coming together for an hour, hour and a half out of the workday. Generally, these are geared towards those professional participants on the TCC. But if you have community members and community champions, you might have to be flexible. So really thinking about, you know, the opportunities to be supportive of a committee coming together, to integrate it and be useful of their time, finding ways of building team and developing that collaborative mindset. And most importantly, you know, identifying local opportunities that they could assist with. So looking at that local data, you know, how can a prevention program, a treatment program, a grant writer engage this committee and help the committee understand some of the challenges that are seen through those professional lenses and ask for guidance and support that would be geared towards proactive prevention within the community. And so you could see here, I think the most important part of it is the green print. You know, how do we keep it simple? How do we have fun? And how do we really dream about change and having those solution-focused conversations and being careful that we don't get stuck on talking about the trauma or drama? Thank you, Sarah.
So true. Nobody wants to go to a boring meeting, right? Gotta have fun. And part of that is falls in the hands of leadership. Sometimes all that a leader needs to do is to make sure that people know that the event is happening and that they want them to go to that meeting. Sometimes it's as simple as that. And so bring your jokes, bring something to have fun with, because it's a tough topic to deal with. Here's just a little bit about the TAP planning process and key elements. We're not going to go into depth on this, but just to kind of share these with you. There's a planning process that includes visioning, taking inventory and measuring your readiness to move forward. We work with you to do some brainstorming, then writing and reflecting, updating and celebrating. And then you've heard about the SMART goals: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. I can't believe I got that, Cipriano. Strength-based, trauma-informed, some key elements. Did you have anything to add about this on the key elements of the Tribal Action Plan?
No, you know, this is module 1. This is building the foundation. A lot of you on the call might have heard these comments, you know, or, you know, it's just making sure that we're all building that common language collectively together. So yes, no, this is good.
Great. And this is my favorite section of the presentation. We're going to explore the connection between your garden variety strategic action plan that you may have for any number of federal program grants that you've accepted or you've been awarded, and the tribal action plan. What's the difference? What's the similarity? Just some thoughts about, general thoughts about planning, and Cipriano, please jump in at any time. This is what we've learned. Some of the foundational things that we've learned over our years of working with tribes is that what it comes down to is, besides all of the templates and the meetings and all this, healing is the primary focus of our work. Even sometimes the healing of the group that we're meeting with. It happens in small ways. The next day, things, there are revelations, but you can see the healing happening from the moment you start the whole tribal action plan process. We also have found that we need to trust that solutions reside in the community. We don't have the answers. All we do is facilitate a way to get those answers out of you guys when we visit the community. We've also learned that it's important to remember that planning is cyclical, ongoing, and it's a living experience. Sometimes we meet groups that think, wow, we're going to get this done and we can, check that box off and move on. Oh no, this planning keeps going. And it's a collective dream. That's really what it's all about. Planning is the boring word, but if you think about it as a collective dream, that's more exciting and has many possibilities. And we're planning by all, for all members. If we leave people out, we leave them out at our own peril, because they're part of the fabric of society. They're part of the fabric of the tribe. We need all tribal members. It's so important, and it's difficult to say this next bullet, to ask everyone to check their egos at the door. Get involved, embrace that collaborative mindset, which can be tricky. And to know that we're building the plane while we're flying it. Oftentimes when people call for help with tribal action planning, they've experienced a suicide or a rash of suicides, or a lot of people getting pulled in for drunk in public, or worse, drug addiction. Fentanyl just entered the scenes. We know people are going to be dying. So there's a lot going on. So sometimes we have to kind of do two or three things at once. Here's some variables that we've noticed, especially with politics and leadership. Unspoken, there is often some fear there among people that goes unspoken, that there are some different values among the people in the room that we're working with. Sometimes leadership is either changing in transition, they might be weak, or they might not even show up at all. So there's like this big question mark. Is this something that's ordained by leadership? Can we move forward? Can we do this? Resources, who's controlling the resources? Are they sharing or are they not? Are some resources there, but you can't get to them? What about existing efforts and awareness? We ask the teams that we're meeting with to bring examples of grants that are in play, so we know what's going on right now. What have they had good success with that? Any failures we need to know about? Is there funding that's getting ready to sunset? And what about efforts led by a behavioral health team without others? This is more common than you might imagine. We get called to develop a tribal action plan sometimes, and the only people in the room are behavioral health people. And so we start asking, do you have anyone from law enforcement? How about someone from the schools? How about the business community? So we end up getting into an echo chamber, and that can be a little tricky. And then here's another variable. Sometimes more frequently than you might imagine, there's not a common language across tribal departments. They're talking about the same thing, but they're calling it something else. Or they're not working with that same flow of information. Cipriano, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I think this is a really good list. And, it's a spectrum. I think, some tribes are not going to have all of these challenges, but I think it's important just to have these challenges kind of in the back burner, just so we could change, because they do change. And I think that these variables also lend itself to thinking about strategies to have a successful tribal action plan. So it's not always a I got you, it's a I got your back scenario. And so really kind of thinking about these variables and how do we strategize to make sure that we're starting on a good foot.
I wanted to pause here before I move forward. Were there any thoughts, comments, questions, complaints, anything from people?
I don't see no comments right off the back. So please raise your hand, write stuff in the chat box, give us homework, challenge us, or just make sure, or if you see something missing on the slide, your revisions are very much appreciated.
Absolutely. So isn't a TAP just like a big, huge federal program strategic action plan? Nope. But we can say that a strategic action plan and a tribal action plan both represent a strategic coordinated effort that include communication, collaboration, alignment, leverage, and leadership. And this brings us to the Bobby story. And I wanted to turn this over to Cipriano because he really talks about it pretty well. And this information came directly from the SAMHSA presentation that I saw in 2011.
Yeah, and for a lot of people on the call, you might have seen this already, and this just really states the challenges of the siloed funding streams and the challenges of a family navigating services that might not be connected, not that wraparound approach or that system of care that a lot of our tribal nations are striving for. And as you could see here, if our family members had a young person that would benefit from tapping into services and get the support needed to have a healthy and productive life, they would have to navigate these doors. And even within these doors, there's a lot of sub doors that they would have to go through. And so really thinking about how do we work smarter? How do we have more efficient work supporting our tribal citizens? And it truly is a team effort. But so much of it is really building trust and finding ways that our system can be efficient and effective. And so as you could see here, this Bobby story, which has been around in SAMHSA presentations for quite some time, really outlines the challenges of that federal system and thinking about the 40 to 50 doors a family member might have to knock on in order to get the support needed for a healthy life. Thank you, Sarah.
Absolutely. And just thinking about strategic action plans could be, talking about the education doors or health doors. A tribal action plan could unify all of these or many of these. So it's a tribal action plan is really more like at the 30,000 foot view. And it's tribal led, not federal led. So there are some tools that we use in tribal action plan that you may have seen us use in strategic action planning, specifically for Native Connections. I don't know how many people are on the call that have a Native Connections grant, but if you have a Native Connections grant, it would be very simple for you to start shifting what you've been doing in that Native Connections program work into a tribal action plan. It's just a matter of going from 5,000 foot to 30,000 foot, which is a little tricky, but it's not undoable. We're going to explain that a little bit. So some of the tools that we use in both Native Connections and tribal action planning include the following, and feel free to jump in at any time, Cipriano. We use the GONA as a way to address healing for the community to help them develop a common vision. It's a Native American and also gathering of Alaska Natives is more of a Native-driven approach to solution-focused discussions that really get into behaviors, belonging, and a wonderful way to just gather local data from the group on the ground before you develop your tribal action plan. It informs the TAB. Also, community readiness model assessment or community readiness manual or CRA, whatever you want to call it. It's an assessment that measures the community members' readiness for change helps you get your finger on the pulse of the hearts and the minds of the people before you start choosing and prioritizing goals for your tribal action plan. A community system analysis is just another tool for asset mapping. A SCOT analysis, it's like a SWOT analysis, is strengths, challenges, opportunities, and threats that help you prioritize in realistic goals for your TAP. The relational worldview comes from the NICWA, National Indian Child Welfare Group. And then the collaborative mindset, which is a process for helping you navigate those dynamics of group working relationships that can get kind of hairy sometimes. So all these tools are ways to sort of get ready to develop your tribal action plan. And it seems like a lot of work, but it's really not that bad. And it really puts you in the right place, the right frame of mind, armed with the right information. It takes the guesswork out of moving forward in developing and choosing those goals. Cipriano?
Yes, yes, yes. Each of these tools is not a standalone. You know, in order to develop a strategic plan, you know, these tools will come into play at different stages. And just like we talked about, the planning is a cyclical process. And, you know, sometimes as a TA center, and we start to engage a tribe in thinking about prevention, a lot of times tribal nations or tribal organizations say, where do we even begin? You know, where do we even start in thinking about this process? And what we have learned is, you know, our communities, if they are impacted by trauma, generally we see three things. We see desensitized to the current challenges or barriers that are impacting the community. We see a lot of our community members don't speak up about the challenges, and there's a big challenge of mistrust in the community. So where do you even begin? If those are the norms in the community, where do you start to even think about prevention planning? And so these tools are tools that a tribal nation or tribal organization or program should consider depending on their level of readiness or where they're at. We cannot say enough about how the CRM, the Community Readiness Model, is a vital tool in strategic planning. Not just getting the score. And for a lot of our tribes, we might be in denial about the substance abuse issues in our community. We might have a lack of awareness about the things that are going on in the community. But that score also has best practices to raise your score from where you're at. And that's the vital piece of that model, I feel. The GONA by itself really is to promote healing from historical trauma. Yet when a tribe understands that model and starts to train their own staff in facilitating that model, now you're building the infrastructure of your tribal nation or tribal organization to start having solution-focused conversations. And what I like about these two models that I think are some of the best efforts in Indian country is you're building your strategic plan off a community-based participatory research model. And a lot of times when you engage your community in these wellness and healing conversations, your activities and prevention priorities are matched at their level of readiness of commitment to those efforts. And I think that's the vital piece is we want to hit the ground running. I know a lot of you on this call probably work in tribal nations or tribal communities where your community members are expecting you guys to do things yesterday on efforts. And they don't see all the little things that your organizations are doing. So that feedback loop, how do we engage the community? How do we share what we're doing? And how do we assess is what we're doing on the right track for them? And those two models are great feedback loops to understand those prevention processes. All the other ones are great, yet when you align your resources, that's when we have success. And if there's things that are missing, that's where we'll know that there might be some challenges or hiccups in getting that community mobilization effort moving forward. Thank you, Sarah.
Speaking of hiccups, we wanted to share with you what we call the rainbow slide. And this just kind of outlines for you things to consider that if they're missing, you may have some trouble. I'm going to turn it over to Cipriano because he has a great explanation of this interesting model for managing complex change that we taught we touch on and wanted to share with you in this presentation.
Yes, and we did have a comment from Charlene out of Nevada, and thank you, Charlene, who their tribe is a recipient of the Native Connections Grant, and so she was very appreciative to kind of see it referenced and to be highlighted. And Charlene, just like everybody else on this call, the Native Connections is a great funding resource because you're engaging the community in health and wellness. You're mobilizing the community. You're trying to learn from them what's best. And in this model, managing complex change, when you have an aligned vision built off the skills within the community with incentives that are meaningful and resources contributed to the action plan, that equals success. You know, I was always told that there's no such thing as luck. Luck is 99% preparation for that 1% of opportunity. And what I really like about this model is it shows that if there's components missing, these are some of the impacts I have felt as a professional working in Indian country or as a staff person in the TTA Center have witnessed or observed. That when you don't have an action plan, but you have all these other resources, you have community projects or members that have a lot of false starts. We don't know where to begin. We don't know where to end. We don't know what outcomes are we measuring. If we're missing resources, we see a lot of frustration. People are chomping at the bit. They want to do something, but there's frustration because they don't have no resources to move forward on that action plan. And so this rainbow slide really engages our community, and this might be a useful tool for participants like you, Charlene, who are engaging your community. How do we begin to start aligning these efforts? And what is our vision? How, you know, what is the community's vision of where we want to move forward? The GONA is a great tool for that. What skills do we have? The asset mapping, the SCOT analysis could be a great tool for that. Incentives, you know, what kind of incentives are most important for our people? Those could be either cultural incentives, they could be possibly gift cards, they could be medicines, depending on where your tribe is at with traditional uses. So incentives, but what incentives? So engaging the community around incentives and what would be most helpful for them. What are the resources needed on the activities? This is a great tool to, one, engage your community and where, you know, what assets do we have to start pulling these efforts together. And it's a great resource for your program to make sure that you're promoting the opportunity to be as successful as you're possible with a strategic action plan or a tribal action plan. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. Lots of information to cover. Lots of information, guys. And we know that there are benefits and challenges to gathering and sharing local data. For example, people say they don't have the time. There's roadblocks. And of course, there's the HIPAA monster in the back. Oh, we can't share that because it's personal information, or we have the information, but it's stored on the cloud and we don't know where it is. That's just a little bit about gathering and sharing local data. We wanted to be aware. We do a little bit of a SCOT analysis. That's something that is really important to get that asset mapping on the service infrastructure in your tribe, the sense of the environment and existing resources, so you know what's going on before you start developing that TAP. We're not going to get into this very much, but this is the NICWA relational worldview. If you look at those quadrants, environment, infrastructure, mission, vision, and resources, they have a wonderful set of questions that help you choose. It will help you prioritize and determine realistic goals for your tribal action plan. So I wanted to make sure we mentioned that. A little bit of a discussion about a collaborative mindset. What does it mean, and how, for example, can a GONA, where we start developing collaborative mindset, help that healing process? Cipriano?
Yes, I mean, a lot of us on the call might understand the Tuckman's rule. And the Tuckman's rule that forming, storming, norming, storming, performing process. A lot of times we think that it's kind of linear, but the reality is things are cyclical. And we all drift, you know, change is happening all the time, or unknown trust, or there's distrust in the community, or communities feel like there's a lack of collaboration. So, you know, building the collaborative mindset is no small feat. And the reason that I feel, and I should say we feel, the GONA is helpful is because GONA is a culturally adapted curriculum that any tribal nation should own the agenda. And inside that agenda, every tribal nation, every tribal program should have some support in providing guidance and leadership to the facilitator on what healing means, guest speakers on sharing our story, not saying what's wrong with you, but what happened to us as a people, and to promote the dream. You know, one of the questions I ask is, if our relatives had all of the resources to be well, what would our homes look like? What would our lands look like? What would our tribal services look like? And so, you know, it's so important. And some people say, well, you know, when we do a GONA, we had all these crayons and people just, you know, is laughing, and they don't see that as work.
Oh, they're breaking the crayons out.
Yet one of my great mentors, Theda Newbreast, always talked about, you know, a lot of times when young people are raised in traumatic experiences, the thing we lose is our childhood. And so by having fun in the GONA, by using the right side of our brain and engaging our community members to dream and to share and to build trust with each other, they're going to give us more insight on opportunities to create change than we could ever read out of a book. And so the trick for a facilitator is to know Tuckman's process and how can we be proactive in agenda and activities to use the process to our benefit. We do have a comment in the chat box there. We had, and this is from Charlene Green, I believe from Nevada. We had a GONA just before COVID, which changed the perspective of the community. How do you move forward given the ongoing COVID issues in tribal communities? Great question. And with the growth of virtual efforts in the last year and a half, coming up on 2 years, we're building the plane while we fly. Our TA Center has really sank our teeth into thinking about what a virtual GONA would look like. And what tools do we have accessible to still build a collaborative mindset, even in a virtual platform? Thinking about how do we use Google Docs and share documents? How do we use polling questions? And as even tribes are starting to unpack travel and travel opportunities and just making sure people are safe if there's travel, those things are starting to be fleshed out as well. Charlene, great question. And if you share an email, we can possibly try to give you even more targeted resources on the growth of virtual GONAs and how those virtual GONAs are not supplementing on-site, but collaborating and keeping momentum moving forward with the community through these COVID-19 challenges.
Nice, thanks, Charlene. Thank you, Cipriano. So we're getting towards the end. We have about 5 minutes left, but we might have to do a soft closing. So we're gonna kind of do a warp speed to kind of get you to the end of this presentation. I hope you learned something from it. I hope it helps you. Just to kind of reiterate that the Tribal Action Plan does help you coordinate existing and future federal partner resources. And it's a matter of a culture shift. So often we visit tribes and they are usually reacting to deadlines, financial reports, program reports, quarterly reports or visits. Well, not with COVID, but now that's moving forward. You might have visitations, compliance meetings on your CTAS strategic action plan, or your Garrett Lee Smith, or your systems of care, circles of care, your MSPI, which is now SASP, I don't know the name of that acronym, or your Native Connections strategic action plan. So these are all federal grant-driven entities, these strategic action plans. A tribal action plan is tribe-driven. There's not going to be a federal agency that's going to ask to see your tribe unless you offer it to share it. It's a tribal-driven piece. It can coordinate all of those other strategic action plans if you move forward with it. It's a very powerful piece, and the focus of it is communication, collaboration, and leadership. And this is one of my favorite slides right here. It does help you coordinate your future and existing federal partner resources. So if you look at the logos that are flanking the lady weaving the rug. I almost said carpet, Cipriano. Oh, rug. DOJ, Department of Justice, Bureau of Interior, Health and Human Services, Labor, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA, Department of Education, and others. She's weaving together these streams of funding into a nice, tight, supportive rug for someone in her tribe. So the analogy is that through a tribal action plan, this rug is a tribal action plan. Your tribe can take the initiative to manage and marshal existing and new funding streams into the future, using that language that you have developed through your tribal action plan to apply for these various funding streams. Rather than reacting to, you're acting towards, and you're starting to shift and turn the tables and take control and start to build your nation to the tune of where you want to go, rather than reacting to what the federal departments are able to offer for you. Cipriano, did you want to say anything about this?
Oh yeah, you could call it a saddle blanket. Not just playing. No, I think you did a great job. I think you did a great job.
Okay. So there's some similarities and differences. The similarities between a SAP and a TAP is that they both have vision statements, mission statements, goals, objectives. They're data driven, collaboration really important. They're influenced by community readiness. GONA component can help, and you need a number of tribal departments to maybe be approving of some strategic action plans, but definitely the TAP. The difference is that the SAP is a federally driven program focused entity. The TAP is a tribal driven policy focused entity process. The TAP requires a tribal resolution. Some SAPs do. A strategic action plan will definitely end when that program sunsets, the federal funding goes away, and you have to run around getting another strategic action plan program. The tribal action plan is a living document that you renew. The SAP, look at it from a 5,000 foot view. The TAP is more of a 30,000 foot view. And I like these questions. You know, if you ask this question, what are some challenges the community is facing in the long term after a program sunsets? That kind of question gets you to starting to think about getting a TAP together. How can the community build infrastructure to support lasting change? And what is the value of having a tribal action plan if we already have some grants to help us? Cipriano, did you want to take a risk at answering that last question?
I think it's important for us to, get away from the idea that when something sunsets, what do we lose? We lose a job or position. What we're seeing is tribes be proactive in saying, how can we maximize training and technical assistance through these funding streams? How do we not just think about sustainability as a dollar amount, but as an opportunity to train our community members? We have seen tribes really ramp up their support for behavioral health first aid, building a common language of wellness across our community and family members, thinking about mobilizing our traditional and cultural modalities, our social gatherings, our feast under prevention and wellness efforts. Those will not leave or be sunsetted out at the end of a funding stream. And a tribal action plan can synthesize and support those community-led efforts that will have been here since time immemorial, and will be here as long as the tribe keeps practicing those processes. So again, the tribal action plan is a tribal-led system that should be built on the things that are most important to the tribe. And that is a roadmap to catch our federal partners up to what resources are needed. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you so much. I know we're running out of time, so we're gonna go through, get to our last few slides. We talked about the TCC. I want to get to this little slide here about the federal funding for alcohol and drug prevention and treatment that could be wrapped in. If you have a tribal action plan, you could use the language in that TAP to go for any one of these grants right here. You may have seen them, the Garrett Lee Smith, the CTAS, the Coordinated Tribal Assistance Solicitation, Native Connections, the TOR grant here, Systems of Care. So it's very powerful and versatile.
And I think, most of those are just under SAMHSA. When you think about all those federal partners that we reviewed, and you think about your tribal prevention portfolio, You know, are you receiving CTASC funding through the Department of Justice? Are your housing and prevention, your public safety and prevention, those are all linked opportunities.
Exactly. This slide right here is a real quick snapshot at some milestones of what you need to get a TAP off the ground. It's called, Are We Ready for a TAP Yet? And there's the beginning column, the intermediate column, and the advanced column. And oftentimes we'll find a tribe that has there's some over here and then some over here and there's some things over here. Like they may already have a tribal resolution and they have regular meetings, but they only have some support and interest. They may not even have a community readiness assessment score with them yet. So this is a nice gauge to kind of, you want to move always over to the right-hand side to the green column to get to an advanced state of where you're ready to really go forward and create that tribal action plan. Cipriano, did you want to share anything about that?
No, I think this grid is really helpful. Again, you know, this is not set in stone. If you have pieces of it, tribes are all over the spectrum in regards to that. And, you know, some of our initial conversations will help kind of flesh out a starting place. Thank you.
Absolutely. And we are moving towards the end of this. So completing a tribal action plan could answer the following questions. Can we articulate the scope of our effort and what are we trying to achieve? Who will do all of this work? Have we identified suitable partners? What resources are or will be available to achieve the results we're looking for? Have we identified barriers and challenges to the implementation? And how and when will we know our goals have been achieved? Those are all answered in the tribal action plan when you have that done. And we've made it to the end of this first module. I want to give you a brief view of what's coming up next month. Here's a little bit of our agenda we'll cover. I'm going to ask Cipriano to help me discuss what we'll be covering, but we'll definitely get into more of the SCOT analysis, the GONA, the community readiness assessment, and how it affects TAP development. Cipriano, would you also?
Yeah, I think it also too is kind of look at, you know, the opportunity that grassroots efforts assist leadership, you know, and how leadership can engage and use and maximize the lessons learned through SCOT analysis, community readiness, and GONA efforts. And then really look at, you know, just that coordination and collaboration. I think those are the two big C's that when we initially work with tribes, those are the things that we want to start to peel back the layers, get a good current view. And if a tribe can identify any specific obstacles or barriers, gives us a great chance to do homework.
At this time, I know we're just a little bit past the half hour. Does anyone have any closing comments, suggestions, or questions for us before we close?
Please feel free to raise your hand or use the chat box and we will unmute your line and or read off your question or comments in the chat box.
And Mark, this is being recorded too. How can people get a copy of the recording?
We'll send it out to everybody that registered today.
Outstanding. Thank you so much. Anything in the chat box, Cipriano?
No, but just to buy everybody a little bit of time, just again, thank you so much for taking the time out of your guys' important work and work schedule and to be part of this conversation. And if anything does pop up after, I really hope that you guys feel free to send us emails, comments, or any questions that do arise.
Thank you. This is just the beginning.
All right, Sarah, I think we're let off the hook. I don't see anything popping up in the chat box.
Well, thank you everyone for participating. You stayed with us for an hour and a half. We appreciate you. We'll see you next time, hopefully back in, the next date is June 23rd for planning and preparing. See you then.